5 years, said the Duke of Mardale, standing in the rain on the step of a two-room cottage at the wrong end of England. You might at least let me in out of the weather before you shut the door on me. The woman in the doorway had gone the color of the whitewash behind her. She was thinner than he remembered, and her hands were rough, and there was chalk dust on the cuff of a gown that had been turned twice, and she was, beyond any possibility of error, Aveline Crewe. "You have made a mistake, sir," she said. "My name is Ward." "Your name is Aveline Margaret Crewe. You were born at Little Sarn. Your father was a naval surgeon, and your guardian was the rector of Mardale, and you play the second movement of the Belhaven hymn with a turn in the fourth bar that is not written in the music, because you invented it when you were 19 and thought nobody was listening." Lucian Raid did not move from the step, though the rain was running off the brim of his hat and down his collar. "I have had every music seller in the North Kingdom watched for 2 years for that turn. It came out in a collection at Kelbridge in March, arranged by a Mrs. A. Ward, and I have been 11 days coming here. So, Mrs. Ward, may I come in?" She shut the door. He heard the bolt go across. Lucian stood in the rain a while longer, because he had ridden 160 miles and was not inclined to be brisk about it. And then he walked back down the lane to the village of Netherkum, took a room at the Fleece, and sent his man home with the horses. "Home, your grace," said Gomer, appalled. "Home, tell Mrs. Piddock I do not know when I shall return." He looked out of the little window at a grey street and a church tower and a green with 3 geese on it. "I have found her. I am not leaving." He had been 29 and an idiot 5 years before. That was the whole of his side of it, and he had spent 5 years learning to say it plainly. There had been a house party at Mardale in the last September of his mother's life. 40 guests, shooting, cards, music in the evenings, and Aveline Crewe playing for them, because the rector's ward could be asked to play and not asked to dance. He had stood by the pianoforte 4 nights running and made observations about the weather while she played, and had understood perfectly well what he felt, and had said nothing, because he was a duke of 11,000 acres and she had £90 a year, and because he had told himself there was no hurry. On the 5th night, his cousin Sabina's diamond aigrette went missing from her dressing table. It was found the next morning in Aveline Crewe's workbox, under the silks. Lucian had been in the room when Sabina held it up. He remembered every second of it, the shriek of triumph, the 40 faces turning, his mother rising too fast from her chair and having to be helped, and Aveline standing in the middle of the drawing-room in a white muslin gown with her hands at her sides, saying only, "It is not mine, and I did not take it," in a voice so level that half the room decided at once that she was brazen. "Then how came it in your box?" Sabina had cried. And Aveline had looked. Lucian had watched her look, not at Sabina and not at him, but at the doorway, where his brother Piers stood with a glass in his hand, and a face like wet paper. She had looked at Piers for perhaps 2 seconds. Then she had said, "I cannot tell you," and she had not said another word in her own defense that night or ever. His mother, who loved her, had wept and begged. The magistrate was not called, because a duke's household does not call magistrates for a rector's ward. Instead, the thing was done the county way, which was worse. She was sent from the house before breakfast. By Christmas, there was not a family within 40 miles who would have her in the schoolroom, and by Candlemas she was gone out of the world altogether, leaving behind one letter for the rector saying she was well and would not be found, and one thing that had eaten at Lucian Raid for 5 years, nothing at all for him. His mother died in November. Sabina married a baronet in Kent. Piers went into the Hussars and got himself shot at in 3 countries and came home in the spring of the 4th year with a bad arm and a worse conscience. and Lucien, who had had 4 years to think, put a decanter and 2 glasses on the table between them and said, "Now, the aigrette." That conversation had lasted 2 hours. At the end of it, Piers had written and signed a statement in his own hand, and Lucien had begun to look for her in earnest. For 11 days at Netherkum, he did not force her door once. He learned the shape of her life instead, which was easy in a village of 400 souls. She taught music and French to 7 girls in the vestry room from 9 until 2, and the vicar's wife thought her a saint, and the smith's daughter would have fought for her. She kept 2 hives and a great many onions. She was a widow, by the village's understanding, and no one had ever seen the widower. On Sundays she played the church organ, which had a wheeze in the tenor pipes. He hired the pew at the back on the second Sunday, and sat in it in his plain riding coat. And when she came round the corner of the chancel afterward and saw him there, she stopped as if she had struck a wall. "You are still here." "I am. People are asking who you are." "I have told them my name is Raid, and I am in the north on business." "You are a duke, sir. You cannot lodge above the tap-room of the Fleece for 11 days without the whole valley finding out." "Then the whole valley will find out." He rose. "Mrs. Ward, your gate has been off its lower hinge since I came. I have asked the smith for a pin, and I mean to mend it tomorrow at 10, and if you turn me off your ground, I shall mend it from the lane side, which will look very odd. Good morning." She was standing in the garden with her arms folded when he arrived. She watched him take his coat off and set the hinge, and did not offer to help, and did not go inside. "You are hoping I will grow tired and confess something," she said. "I am hoping you will let me tell you 6 things I know." He tapped the pin home. "You may listen while I work, which will spare you having to look at me." "Say them, then." 1. You did not take the aigrette. 2. My cousin Sabina did not take it either, and I have wronged her in my thoughts 100 times, which she does not deserve. 3. My brother Piers took it, and pawned it at Salter's in the Strand for 80 guineas to cover a card debt to a man who was threatening to bring the paper to my mother. 4. He redeemed it 4 days later with money he had begged from you, out of the £90 a year my mother left in trust for your keep. And he was too great a coward to put it back in Sabina's room himself. And so he pushed it into the first hiding place he could reach in a passage full of guests, and the workbox on the window seat was yours. The rain of the last fortnight had stopped. The garden smelled of wet onion tops and thyme, and somewhere a hen was complaining. 5, said Lucien, not looking up. You knew it within a minute of Sabina opening that box, because he was standing in the doorway with a face like a boy caught at a jam pot. And 6. He set down the hammer and straightened, and made himself look at her. My mother had 8 weeks to live, and she knew it and you knew it, because you were the one who sat up with her, and heard what the physicians would not say to me. And you decided that she would not spend those 8 weeks being told that her younger son was a thief and a card player who had robbed his mother's ward to cover it. So you let them turn you out at 7 in the morning, and you never said one word. Have I any of it wrong? Aveline Crewe put one hand out and took hold of the gate-post. You have the number of guineas wrong, she said. It was 75. Lucien discovered that he had been holding his breath for 5 years. She gave him tea, at last, in a room with a scrubbed table and a hired pianoforte that took up a third of it, and she sat across from him with her hands round the cup, as though she were cold. He came to me at midnight, she said. Piers. He was 22 and shaking, and he said if the Duchess were told it would kill her, and I thought, God forgive me, I thought he was right. So I gave him the money and told him to redeem the thing and put it back where he had it, and I went to bed thinking I had mended it. I did not know he had hidden it in my box until I saw his face in that doorway. You could have said it there and then. I could, she looked up. Your Grace, your mother was in that room. She was holding on to the arm of her chair with both hands. If I had spoken, she would have heard it in front of 40 people and been dead in a month instead of 2, and she had promised me she would live to see the Michaelmas roses. I made a choice. It was not a noble one. It was simply the one I could bear. And afterward I was a thief who would not deny it, which is worse than a thief who does. Her mouth went crooked. There was no place for me anywhere within reach of your name, so I went where the name did not reach, and I called myself a widow because a widow may live alone and teach, and nobody asks her father's business. And I have been Mrs. Ward for 5 years, and I am tolerably good at it. You have been alone for 5 years. I have been at peace for 5 years, she said. It is not the same thing, but it is not nothing. Lucien set down his cup. May I say the rest of it now? There is no need. There is a very great need, and I have waited 5 years, so you will forgive me. He put his hands flat on the table. I stood by your instrument 4 nights together at Mardale and talked to you about the barometer. I was in love with you then, and I knew it, and I said nothing, because I told myself there was time, and because I was a coward about my consequence, my rank, my acres. What 40 people at a shooting party would say about a duke and a rector's ward. And then a box was opened in my drawing room, and the woman I loved was turned out of my house at 7 in the morning by my own housekeeper. And I stood in the hall and let it happen, because I could not think fast enough, and because some small, contemptible part of me wondered. Aveline had gone very still. That is the thing I have not been able to put down, Lucien said. Not Piers. Piers was 22 and frightened. I have forgiven him more or less, and he has spent 4 years being shot at in penance. Not Sabina. She believed what she was shown. Myself. For 2 hours on the 10th of September, 5 years ago, I wondered whether you had done it. And you knew I wondered because you looked at me in the hall as they brought your box down, and I did not say one word. I remember, she said quietly. I have not slept easily since. She was silent for a while. Out on the green somebody's geese set up an argument. Why did you look for me? She said. Truly. If it was to make amends, sir, you have made them. You may go home with a clear conscience, and I shall be very glad to have been told the truth in my own kitchen. If it was for pity. Aveline. It was the first time he had said her name in 5 years, and he heard it come out badly. I have Piers's confession in writing, signed and witnessed. I have the pawnbroker's entry, copied and attested. I have already written to 11 families in the county, and the rector, who has been praying for you nightly, and told me so at length, will read the whole of it in the vestry at Mardale to anyone who wishes to hear it. Your name will be cleared whether you ever set eyes on me again or not. That is done. It is not conditional on anything. He stood because sitting had become impossible. But I did not come 160 miles for a signature. I came because you are the only person I have ever wished to talk to at the end of a day, and because there has not been 1 hour in 5 years when I did not want to know where you were, and because when I heard 4 bars of that hymn played in a shop in Kelbridge with your turn in it, I sat down on a stranger's chair like a man shot. I am here to ask whether you might, in time, consent to be my wife, not to be restored, not to be repaid, to be the Duchess of Mardale because I love you, and because I have been a great deal worse than lonely without you. The room was so quiet he could hear the hives out in the garden. You cannot, said Aveline Crewe. I can, and I have consulted no one about it. Your Grace, Lucien. She rose too, and her hands were trembling, and she pressed them together to stop it. I am 29. I have been called a thief in a room full of the best families in your county. I keep bees. I have £22, a pianoforte on hire, and a gown I have turned twice. Whatever the rector reads out in a vestry, there will be women in your drawing rooms who will always say there was something in it, and they will say it to your children. Then they may say it to me first and see how they like the answer." He came round the table. "Aveline, I do not ask you to pretend that costs nothing. I ask you to weigh it. And I will tell you what is on the other side of the scale, so that you may weigh honestly. 11,000 acres, which I care nothing for, a library you would like very much, a pianoforte that is not on hire, and a man of 34 who has learned at some expense that when he knows a thing he must say it in the room, out loud at the time, whatever 40 people think. I did not know that 5 years ago. I know it now. You taught it to me by walking out of my house in silence and leaving me to live with what I had not said." She looked at him for a long moment. "I should want the bees," she said unsteadily. "Bring the bees. And I will not be married quietly in a corner, sir. If it is done at Mardale, in your own church, with the whole county invited, and the confession read out beforehand so that nobody may have the pleasure of a whisper." "That," said the Duke of Mardale, "was precisely my intention." And then Aveline Crewe began to cry, in the way of a woman who has not permitted herself to do it for 5 years, and Lucian took her hands and held them, and after a while she leaned her forehead against his shoulder and let him. He did not leave Netherkum for another 3 weeks. He had a piano tuner brought 40 miles to see to the wheeze in the tenor pipes of the church organ, which the vicar spoke of for the rest of his life. He sat at the back of the vestry room while 7 girls murdered a French verb. He mended the other gate. They were married at Mardale in the last week of September, on a bright cold morning, with the Michaelmas roses out along the south wall, his mother's roses, which Aveline had once been promised. The rector read Piers's statement from the chancel steps before the service, in a voice that shook with something that was not sorrow, and Piers himself stood up in the front pew with his bad arm and said quite clearly that every word of it was true and that he had been the worst of brothers and the worst of debtors, and asked her pardon in front of 200 people. She gave it. Lucian, watching her give it, thought that he had never in his life seen anything so far above him. They walked out under a rain of thrown wheat, and the tenants cheered, and Sabina, who had come and been forgiven, and cried more than anyone, declared to a general audience that she had always liked Miss Crewe's playing best. That evening the new Duchess of Mardale sat down at an instrument that was not on hire, in a room full of candlelight, and played the Belhaven hymn with the turn in the 4th bar that was not written in the music. Her husband stood by the pianoforte, as he had 5 years before, and did not say one word about the weather.